My name is Clarissa James. I am 30 years old and I live in the beautiful town of Brentwood, England. Before all of this, my life was like many others. I worked hard in my job and was always looking for love, something real, something that felt solid. I grew up in a loving family and was raised to believe in fairness and kindness. When I met Dan in March of 2021, he drew me in with his charm and the image he crafted. He was 43 and he had just returned from studying in Egypt. He told me that he had converted to Islam, and I believed he was a grounded man. He had his own flat, a car that seemed brand new, and the latest tech gadgets. I thought I had found a mature partner who was self-sufficient. Little did I know, it was all a facade. Within a few weeks of our first meeting, we ended up getting married in an Islamic ceremony. I was so excited because it felt as if I had finally met someone who understood me and shared my beliefs. But soon after the honeymoon phase faded away, everything changed. I began to notice that I was the one paying for our meals, outings, and even the little things like snacks. I would express my concerns, but Dan brushed them off, assuring me that everything would be fine. He convinced me that his circumstances were tough because he needed to support his parents in Scotland, and that was why he had a male lodger living in his flat. He insisted it was just for rent money. Wanting to be supportive and believing in the love we had, I agreed to rent an apartment in my name since he assured me he would cover the rent. That too turned out to be a lie. Time and time again, Dan would come up with excuses, each one more elaborate than the last. He would contribute a small amount here and there, but it would not even come close to what I was putting into the relationship. At one point, I even gave him £400 thinking I was being the good wife, supporting him through his car repairs. I remember we took a vacation to the Seychelles, and he was charming as ever, making me feel special. I paid for everything during that trip, but I convinced myself it was an investment in our future together. In my heart, I yearned to believe we would turn this into a lifelong love story. But reality hit hard 2 days after we returned to England when Dan shocked me with the news that he had 2 other wives. He told me these were religious marriages, not legal in the eyes of the law. I was stunned, utterly devastated. I felt sick as I tried to process how someone could spin such intricate lies. 10 days later, I received a phone call from one of his other wives, Nadia. She was 50 and had experienced years of Dan's deceit just like I was. She painted a grim picture filled with tales of emotional abuse, manipulation, and financial entrapment. I wanted so badly to disbelieve her, as deep down, a part of me didn't want to accept that the man I thought I loved was just a good con artist. But everything began to unravel. Nadia exposed the truth. The lavish lifestyle Dan flaunted was built entirely on her labor. She was a civil servant who paid for all his bills, rent, and even owned the car he drove. It turned out she was the lodger he hid from me. I was confused and devastated. I had put so much into this relationship, emotionally and financially, and here I was, holding the bag. Every day I would wake up to pay £1,000 or more in rent, bills, and expenses with no help from him. It took me a long time to come to terms with his manipulation, to see him for who he truly was. He was an expert at triangulating women, sucking everything he could out of us, living a comfortable life at our expense while pretending to adore us. I became emotionally detached, and in that state of self-reflection, I realized I needed to take control of my situation. So, I set a trap. I told him that I planned to build a new life back in the Seychelles. I started discussing my dreams of living luxuriously, painting a picture of an idyllic life I wanted to have there. I told him he would need to stay here in England half the year for the sake of his other wife, which is supposedly what was fair. It was almost like a switch flipped in him. As I made more space for myself while remaining calm and emotionally aloof, he suddenly started to chase after me. The roles began to reverse in a strange way. More drama unfolded as Nadia grew increasingly anxious. She felt desperate and threatened to harm herself if he chose to leave her. Dan, true to his nature, started pulling away from her more, seemingly enjoying the newfound attention from me. She began sending him more money, believing it would lure him back, while he would badmouth her to me as if I was somehow meant to be on his side. I guess he forgot that I had stood by him in the beginning, but everything changed one day when Nadia stormed into his flat, finding us together. The chaos that erupted was almost surreal. She broke down completely while also calling me names and expressing her own torment. In that heartbreaking moment, she seemed more like a shell of the woman she once was. It became painfully clear what 7 years of her hope and longing had done to her. After that confrontation, I stayed, but I changed the rules. I told him I would not be covering his rent or bills anymore. He argued, staring wide-eyed in panic as I reminded him of his responsibilities as my husband. I could see the realization hit him hard. He had lost his other wife, his source of financial support, and now he was left with me who was no longer going to be his cash cow. I could see him miscalculating his next move. He thought he had me wrapped around his finger, but instead, he was the one at my mercy. The balance of power shifted silently and strategically, and I finally felt a sense of freedom. Whenever he portrayed himself as a victim, I would maintain my silence, forcing him to confront the reality he was trying to escape. Ultimately, I left when he hit rock bottom. I learned through this experience that people-pleasing can masquerade as love, but in truth, it can become a form of self-abandonment. It was heartbreaking to realize how I had drained myself while trying to save someone unworthy of my support. Financial abuse isn't loud, and it can be hard to recognize, but it taught me that I could reclaim my power, not through revenge in a violent sense, but by establishing clear boundaries and maintaining my emotional control. I no longer blamed myself for what happened. I released that burden and shifted my focus towards healing and self-discovery. To anyone in a similar situation, I would urge them to seek clarity and recognize their worth. Revenge doesn't always mean screaming or acting out. Sometimes it simply means thriving while someone else watches you grow in ways they could never imagine. I wished Nadia well and hoped she found her strength and healing, as I knew we both deserved better. If you are ever in a situation like I was, remember, it is possible to rise from the ashes, stronger and wiser.